Today,
Recording in progress.
we are indeed looking at the Psalm 124. This is one of the psalms that the Israelites sang when they were going up on their journey to Jerusalem. There were three festivals that they used to attend, but from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134, those are the psalms that were penned down. They are songs that were penned down for the Israelites to sing. Now we come into this one where when you look at it, it has got just basically two things about it. This is the Psalm of David, and David is beginning it with the fact that if it were not for the Lord, if it were not for God, if it were not for the Lord, if it had not been for the Lord on our side, let Israel say. Now, he's beginning it because this is a psalm that brings in remembrance of the things that the Israelites were taken through, the things that even David himself was taken through, remembering that. And he also brings out the vivid pictures of the things that they went through as Israelites, as human beings, as Israelites and as individuals, human beings. Now, the good thing about the Psalms, or about this Psalm, or about the Word of God, is that it is applicable for all generations. And so, even to us, it is relevant to date. And we could say that first part where, if it were not for the Lord. What if? We could say it is a what if question. And then you look back, when you look back, there are all those things that the Lord was there for you. And then you see that actually if it were not for him, then we would not be here. Then something else would have happened. Then, of course, praising his God, and then eventually at the end, knowing that it is only the help that comes from God is authentic. Our help comes from the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. In Psalm 21 we saw that one. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. In 121 it brings in a picture where there was like people would go to the mountains to seek for answers where they thought they had those gods. But here the Israelites are being reminded that actually the help only comes from God. Yeah, so let's just examine a few things about this psalm. A psalm which part of it I would say, what if psalm? What if that which you didn't, what if, maybe I would like to start it by really looking at, I would think it is imaginary, but actually it happened, whereby there was tsunami. I don't think it was, some people we may not remember because there were some years back. There's tsunami, the oceans just rose and they came and swept the people. Now you can imagine that situation where there was a night which was calm. Some people say that actually months before that tsunami happened, that the animals went to higher ground. It was, and some people feel like, the animals sense danger better than the human beings. Now you can imagine of a family whereby they went to sleep and then only to wake up and all this flooding is coming in. The flooding is coming in to sweep them away. And they are helpless, that kind of thing. So there are some who survived that. Now, in this small story is a small village whereby they have got a river, and that river is calm, and they have built their homes along that river, and everything is quiet. And now one night it floods. It rains and rains and rains. And after that, the banks break and the water comes in and it rushes into the homes. And the people become helpless. They don't have anywhere to run. And then the rescue workers come in. And someone who was rescued in that village would ask the question, what if those rescuers didn't come? Where would we be? Even the tsunami I'm talking about, there's some people who were rescued. Of course, sadly, there's quite a number again who didn't. But for those who were rescued, they would ask this question, which is relevant here. So the fact that he says, if the Lord had not been on our side, if the Lord had not been on our side, and let Israel say, if the Lord had not been on our side. Now, that's the question that we start with here this morning. On that small village, some of them wanted to come out to run away, but the bridge had already broken, and therefore they became helpless. But then the rescue comes up. Some people were there crying, I can't rescue myself. What should I do? What should I do? Where do I turn? Who can I call? All those were the questions on that night. But what do you do then? In this case, bring it home. What would you do when a big situation comes and you are helpless? What do you do when you are unwell and perhaps you have to be rushed to the hospital and you are in that situation? What do you do when you are going through a financial problem? Very, very hard. What do you do when the job fails and you are jobless? What do you do when there's something which we don't experience here, but some people go through days and they are hungry. They don't have anything to come. And then when the rescue comes in, the food comes in, then they ask they ask this question: if it were not for the rescue people, if it were not for those people who brought in food, we would not have been here. We would not be still alive. Yeah. So that is what is when such a situation comes in, the only thing we can do is to have faith, because in those situations of hardship, of confusion, of total helplessness, it is faith that speaks. Faith is going to speak, and our God is going to come through, because that is how the God of Israel came through to them when there were those hard situations. And it takes us to surrender. We just have to surrender. When you are in a situation when you are helpless, you have to surrender. It is only when you surrender to the person who is helping you that you can get help. When you come to a situation where here he talks about the psalmist is talking about the people. Let's get back to that situation. He says, that if the Lord had not been on our side, when people attacked us, they would have swallowed us alive. When the anger flared against us. Brethren and saints of God, that situation that the psalmist or David is describing there is a situation of relationship. Have you been in such a situation whereby someone just hates you, that when they look at you, they just hate you, for no apparent reason? They are so hateful that they want you not to even be in that space where we are. This is what he's talking about. In that situation, there is someone who cares, and that is our God. Have you had a situation where people have taken up maybe gossip about your situation, and they have even exaggerated it? Yeah. It says that can swallow you. That can really tear you to pieces. Have you had that situation? And then it is in that situation when you say, if it had not been for the Lord, because it's only God who can take you through that situation, especially there could be a family situation, it could be friends, it could be at work, it could be neighborhood, when really you are going through, people are utterly just angry. They don't want you to occupy that space. They don't want you to be happy. They're actually happy when you are not happy. When you are not happy, then they are happy. That situation, we have to ask our question. That's when our help speaks our faith speaks into that situation. The faith speaks into that situation. And it says, if it had not been for the Lord, they would have swallowed us. Now, that's the God that we have. Now, we are reminded from scriptures, the fires of of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar threw Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in fire. But who else was in that fire? The Lord was in that fire. Right now you could be having fires around you, within you. The only one who can rescue you is God, because he knows when the boys were in the fire didn't even touch them. Literally didn't touch them, to the extent that the kings now said, he exclaimed, this king was a pagan king, didn't believe in the Israelite God. He exclaimed, we threw in 3 boys, but I'm seeing 4. And the 4th seems to be the Son of God. This man even identified God in that fire situation. You know what, brothers and sisters? God is going to be identified in your fire situation, because you may have fires even right now as I'm talking. Those fires, they are not going to touch you. You'll go through it, but they will not touch you. Another situation is the lions. Again, this was another king who didn't like not that he didn't like, actually he liked Daniel. The guy I'm talking about is called Daniel. He liked Daniel. The only problem is Daniel had other people who didn't like him. And they fabricated his situation to the extent that now it compromises his God. But he refused to be compromised. He continued praying. And the verdict was, rather the decree was that if you don't worship another God other than the God of Israel, then you are going to be thrown in the den. He was thrown there. Again, the lions didn't eat him. Maybe this morning we have got those lions around us, but they will not eat us. That is the God that we serve, and those are the things that we can remember. It might not be now, but we can remind ourselves those places where things were really tough. Yeah, the third one, of course, is David himself, who is writing this. Yeah, David against Goliath. David had a big monster, big man, but because he believed in God, he put down that Goliath. And we can have those situations. It could be financial, it could be health situation, sickness, it could be relational. But here is the God who is present even now. Yeah, so the last example I just want to pull up is the Israelites themselves. You know, when they left Egypt, they were going to the promised land. And when Pharaoh had decided that they go, he said, that was not the right decision. No way, we have to get back this, because the Israelites were slaves that time. I will not go through the whole story, but when they were in Egypt, they were slaves. So all the Egyptians had all these slaves, and when Pharaoh releases them, they go off. Actually, they went off anyway. And then certainly Pharaoh's guys come in and say, what have you done? No one is washing our dishes. No one is tending to the garden, and so on. And so then he sends his army and to go after them. So when they reached the Red Sea was in front of them. The army of Pharaoh was behind them, and they were stuck. They were stuck. In between, to the right and the left, there were mountains. Where would they run? They were stuck. And that's one of the things this psalm remembers. It says at the time when those flood waters would have swallowed them, God came through and made a path. And in fact, during that time, Moses in Exodus 14:13 says, he tells them, Moses said something which is encouraging, not encouraging to them, even to us. He said in Exodus 14:13, it says, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. We are encouraged by that. You know, when you are in a problem, fear hits first. And you know, fear comes from the enemy. God doesn't give us fear. And so Moses is encouraging them, fear not. Just stand still. We just sang, be still and know. Stand still. You know, when you are fearful, you panic. You get confused. You may, if you are praying, you may pray. As you are praying, you seem like the prayer is going, it is bouncing off the ceiling. You are not nobody, or it's not even going beyond your mouth. You get confused. But then here, when you are still and you know that it is God who is in that situation, then you find what has caused confusion to actually go away. In this situation here, it was a miracle. Saints, we serve a God of miracles. He's a miracle-working God. So here, the Israelites, they just saw the waters open, and they walked through. And when you read the story, as they walked through, when they went to the other side, then the Pharaoh's army wanted to follow them. As they did, the waters get back, and they swallowed the enemy. The enemy wanted to swallow the Israelites, but instead, the Lord was there for them. The same thing here. The enemy is not going to swallow you. Jesus is here to rescue you. And that's where then we say, if it had not been for the Lord. You know, I don't know really, again, that kind of story, how it is appearing to us at this moment, the Red Sea stories, where you have that situation which is so tight. The situation is so tight, and you say, how can I go through this? I'm sure we have had that situation a number of times where you say, how can I go through this? The purse is empty. You look at the bank account, is empty, and the rent is due, or the mortgage is due. How do I go through this? You know, oh, you are so unwell. How do I go through this? You know, how do I go through this? You see, maybe it could actually, I've already mentioned sickness. It could be a family crisis. It could be a family crisis. How do we go through this? You know, it could be financial struggle, as I've just mentioned again. It could be a broken relationship. It could be a difficult season at work. How do I go through this? You know? And when those situations come, we have to come back to God. We come back to God, and what do we say? We say, Lord, I don't know how I can go through this danger. I don't know, and I can't do it by myself. You surrender. And that's where we say, if it had not been for the Lord, if it had not been for the Lord. When we go through that situation, we say, if it had not been for the Lord, He's the one who can make us go through it. You cannot even explain when that situation comes and you are through. Let me just say share a personal story here. Maybe I've shared it before, but it's relevant. Before we came to this country, we were in Swaziland, and I was teaching there, and the teachers decided to go on strike, and so we were not paid for 3 months, including those who were foreign teachers, to which I was. And the question was, how would we go through the 3 months to meet the needs of food, the normal needs? It was so hard. However, I give this testimony because it is always coming through. When I go back, we got more food during that 3 months than even ourselves, which we could buy. A sack of maize, a sack of rice. We got more food during those 3 months than the food normally we buy. That is our God. And I'm sure you can, if we had time and each person remembered that kind of situation, it must be there. This is our God. So that's why this psalm is related. It's so relatable. And so it doesn't mean that when another situation comes, you say, oh, that's just as he did that. No, we are human beings. We even forget. You fret more. I actually fret more. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I think my wife has got more faith than myself because she encourages me. I think you could be in a similar situation when another person holds your hand. If it had not been for the Lord, how would we have passed through that? You know? Yeah. So we need to come to a situation where we say, it was the Lord. You know, sometimes we shortchange God. When you have been through a sickness and then you recover, we forget very quickly. You've been in financial hardship or relational. It could be relationship. In most cases, really, the hardest is the relationship. Relationship thing is so hard. Why? Because we are made for each other. It could be family, it could be friends. You know, friends and family. I think friends and family, those are the two groups of people who actually influence us throughout our lives. You know, there are others, but those two. If now you have a problem with friends and family, you feel isolated, you feel lonely, you feel you are on your, you feel how are you going through this? You know, and then it pounces you on, and it looks like it is relentless, it's not going away. This friend, I thought we reconciled, it comes back to it. You did ABCD. Okay, I'm sorry, forgive me. Then when another thing comes up, it's, you know, that kind of thing. So we need God. We need God to intervene in those situations so that we can say, had it not been for the God. Now, I have a few sentences here, and when I finish it, you just say, but God. Please just come with me, really. You thought you were going to drown, but God. You thought the enemy was going to defeat you, but God. You thought you would never recover, but God. You thought the door was permanently closed, but God. You thought the story was over, but God. Indeed, but God had another chapter. There is always some things, brethren, there is always some things which we only understand, which you only understand when you look back. By looking back, we realize, and you know, the evil one likes to use that aspect of the fact that we forget. He comes in and you forget that God actually did that. But when we look back, this psalm is telling us, when we look back, you see all those pictorial things that the psalmist, that David is mentioning here. You then remember. You think about you think about that door that was closed, but God God, it was closed and you didn't like it, but that was because God protected you. You know, you may think of that delay. Why did they delay? But yet that was God's timing. You think about the disappointment that was, and you find that disappointment came because God was redirecting things in your life. You think of the battles. You say, but God, why did you let me to go through those battles? But that actually led you to trust him more, you know. And then you may think about the storms, the storm of life. These storms, again, I've talked about the storms that are vivid. None of us is spared, you know. That could be small. You could be even a child. At school, you could do, your friend can just give you hard time the whole day, and you are in that storm of being rejected, you know. But then God is there to be with you because he's not outside that storm. He's actually there, you know. He does not, he's there all the time. He's there all the time. And therefore here, David begins with that testimony which should be for all of us. If it had not been for God, if it had not been for the Lord, that is our testimony that we should be going away this morning with. This morning? Yes, this morning we are still there, but we still have a few moments. Now listen how again to the same words. Listen about these words. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say. See, David is very intentional. It's very intentional. He says the Lord was on their side. If God is not on our side, then things can go very, very wrong. But if God is on our side, then even if the situation looks gloom, we know that things will work well. I think the English saying, again, I like it when it says, to every dark cloud, there is a silver lining. As long as you are trapped in the silver lining part of the cloud, when the dark part goes down, it doesn't go with you. You remain floating in the silver lining. I just like that picture. I don't know whether it's true, but I like it that way to see it. Make sure that you are trapped in the silver part of the dark cloud. And therefore, you go the other side. And the one who does that for us is none other God himself. Jesus is here to do that. And in fact, he's so intentional that he left his royal place, heaven. He left heaven for you and me because he saw we were swimming. The flood waters were going to get us. The sin, we were going to die in separation with our God. He left heaven. He came down. That is the God that we serve. That is the Savior that we serve. That is the Redeemer that we serve. That is the Rock of Ages that we serve. And this psalm reminds us. And at times, when you read this psalm, you think Christ is not in there. No, he's there. He's there. Because all what David is mentioning here, Jesus was there. He rescued them. He was at the Red Sea. Was in the lion's den. Was in the fires. And he's here also. That's why these examples are so relevant to our situations. Now, it looks as if there's so much, and our times. I have always been told I do talk a lot, but there's so much, when we talk about God, there's so much. Anyway, what if God had not protected us? Because there is always those questions. What if he had not intervened? What if he had not answered our prayers? What if he had not given us strength? What if God had not opened the door? What if God had not made a way? Where would we be today? Let's take that one sinking. Where would we be today? Actually, we would not be here, because that situation was sweeping us off track. It could be a situation of sickness. We would not be here. It could be a situation of financial distress. It could not be here. It could be a situation of friends and family coming up against you. We would not be here. That because of God, we are here. Yeah. Continuously thinking about ourselves, our own life, about the dangers that God brought us through, about the battles, about the prayers that God answered, about when we were afraid, but God gave us peace, about the fact that we were weak, but God gave us strength. That is the God that we serve. That's the God that we serve. So we are going to finish by these words again, the same words. If it had not been for the Lord, I would. I want to encourage I want to challenge each person to fill in that gap. And let me read it again. If it had not been, just say it to yourself, if it had not been for the Lord, I would. Dash, dash, dash. Fill in that situation that fills in that. Therefore, our God is our anchor. When we write 360 degrees around us, it's still God. It comes back to God. It comes back to God. So this morning, let us be strengthened that we would have been nowhere if the Lord had not intervened. The Lord was on our side. And therefore, whenever you go through anything that is challenging, know that whatever you are going through, it could be the enemy, does not have the final word. The enemy doesn't have the final word. It would be the financial distress. That does not have the final word. It could be you are trapped in a very difficult as that particular part that you filled in, that's not the final word. It would be those circumstances. The circumstances don't have the final word. Where does the final word come from? God has the final word. God has the final word. If it had not been for the Lord, where would I be today? It is God who has the final word. May we go out there being strengthened that God who has got the final word is the one we come back to all the time. We shouldn't stagger. Whatever the situation, we shouldn't stagger. We should be intentional and go to the one who has got the final word. May the Lord bless us all.